Today's conversation, we're going to be talking about careers in terms of having a life in corporate and then finding your life again ephehlweni.
Yeah.
Because you went from corporate. Wathi ngaphakathi ephehlweni from there.
I was actually, when I went to Petron, I was in corporate.
You were in corporate.
Yeah, I was in corporate.
So we're going to talk about those two dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's get into this.
Sure.
About the different aspects of the art of balance here on the sit down. And today we get into a conversation about the realities of balancing the demands of our spiritual callings and our careers. We also take a look at the formal working environment and if it's really accommodating to our traditional practices and beliefs as Africans. Joining us on today's The Sit Down Careers is much celebrated sangoma, mentor and life coach Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi. The best way to summarize her life's work is that she is a facilitator of change. She is passionate about enlightening people to view life from a different perspective through bringing about changes in the outlook to allow a holistic healing for everyone in the world. Thank you so much for joining us on The Sit Down.
Thank you for that introduction. It actually reminds me of my corporate days when my bios always had to be read, when you're doing some client work and they had to introduce you.
But I mean, I'm sure you get your bio read all the time right now because there's something, I was telling you in the makeup room that how I came about you was exactly that. You healed something in me that I'd been questioning for so long. Because we run around the world aimlessly trying to figure out answers. And I love access on digital because the answer popped up to me as I was battling with something internally during the lockdown. And it was the answer to exactly what I was battling with at that time.
Yeah.
So do you ever get used to it when people tell you this?
I think I need to accept it in a way to celebrate it. Because I also struggle with the title Celebrity Sangoma. So I need, because I guess, the word celebrity has also been taken out of context, but it's actually meaning the one who's celebrated for their work.
Yes.
So when I meet people and they're like, like you said, you've healed me. I'm like, I've healed you? That's so big, And, Coco, you've done this and you've done this. I don't get overwhelmed. I think I get shocked because I think I'm a strong believer in that it was a co-created experience. I showed up when you were ready for me. So the healing was a co-created experience. Yeah. The seed was already there. I just put on the light switch and you were like, oh, and I was probably your voice of reason that was already there. So I that's maybe where I'm coming from, that I believe that change happens when people are ready and willing to change. When when I say I'm a facilitator, it means I help navigate, I help make easier, but I'm not the change. And I don't do, even with people, I'm like, I'm not gonna heal you. We're gonna go through a healing journey together.
That is so powerful.
So we're gonna heal together.
You started off in advertising as a consultant, a business consultant.
So advertising was one of the industries I worked in. But I spent a lot of time in corporate. And that's when in corporate where the calling back got me. But it's not like I got the calling then. I've always, I think, let me go a few years back.
Yes.
When I realized that something was happening is when I was 16.
Okay.
And I was at a Bible camp when I had 2 premonitions. And you can understand, they freaked me out because I was struggling. I was like, no, why am I seeing people's stuff? And then whatever that I saw did come to pass because I passed on the message. But when they came back, I didn't want to engage with it nor entertain it, and I let it go. So when I went into corporate, I already went into corporate with a somewhat understanding that I might somewhat have what they call a gift because I didn't grow up with that as my environment. I wasn't raised, with African belief systems being strongly embedded, even when my grandfather practiced them. But I wasn't really, I was a child at the time, and when he died, I chose Christianity. So when I went to corporate, I was already there was already a calling. So when I had to initiate, I was stick on in corporate. I was actually an office manager at the time, you know, for a small company that worked in business consultancy. So I was doing that, and I had to go do my training.
Did you ever worry about, this is all going to mess up my career ambitions now? Like, I really wanted to go a certain direction, and now there's this calling, and I have to go heed my calling.
I think by the time I went into it, already what I wanted to do was not manifesting. And I think for me, I just wanted peace. I wanted peace so much because what happened, the more I resisted, the more it persisted. The calling will call until you hit it. And all I could is like, if I can get sanity and contentment, I'll be so happy. So I think for me, all I wanted was contentment and peace and stability, because I had no stability. I mean, I had 2 kids at the time. I just got newly married. So I just needed some kind of peace. I wasn't worried about career. I wasn't worried about, is this going to mess my career? I was more worried, is this going to mess my kid's life? Because my dad didn't take the calling. My mom didn't take her calling. So I was worried because I was like, I don't want my kids to experience this insanity that I'm experiencing. And actually, I was diagnosed with mental illness, you know, earlier on in my life when I was in high school. So I just wanted peace. And whatever the price I had to pay, I was going to do it. But I also didn't know what I was signing myself into until I got a petrol, and I had to do a dance between my work life and my petrol life.
And let's talk about that now. Now you're having to do the dance between the 2 worlds. How well received is African culture, heeding your calling within the corporate space and work environment?
So for me, it was not as harder because, one, I'm a very vocal person and I know who I am, and I do understand my constitutional rights very well. So I'm not easily intimidated in corporate space by, you know, by supremacists, by white supremacy. And where I worked, of course, majority were white people. It is a consultancy business. But I knew they needed me more than I needed them because they needed the numbers to balance. So I was quite aware of that. So I had leverage. So where I worked, it was somewhat a conducive working environment. Then when I got to the advertising, because I had that job and I lost it. I was with them for some time. Then I worked as an office manager and I fell asleep all the time. Like I was asleep during meetings, team meetings, and I managed the office. So like I passed out, and I kind of somewhat asked myself, did I lose that job because of the financial crisis, or did I lose it because I was deemed incompetent because of what was going on? But they invited me the following year to join them as a consultant because I was an employee, and they said as a consultant you become an associate, meaning you don't have a steady income, you get paid as per project. So when I went into advertising, and we worked with a very big pharmaceutical company and a very, very well-known brand, and I was there to meet a particular target because they were struggling. So they've been working on the project for months on end, and they were not getting anything, and they had just 1 month left. So I was promised a very fair commission. And when I came in, of course, they asked me that if you are so good at what you do, how come you're not employed? And from the interview, and this was telephonically, a telephone interview, I was kneeling in the middle of a Pick and Pay shop doing my interview because I was in a red skirt. And when you're in a red skirt, you kneel, you don't talk standing, right? And she's asking me this question, like, so if you're really this good, and you could hear that there was a judgment already. So why are you not saying, I'm like, I'm Nyatwasa, going through an initiation process, like, huh? And it's like, okay, I've got other people to interview. When I sat there, because I needed the job to complete my process, I was like, and she called me within 2 minutes, like, okay, the other candidates are not available. So let's go back. And then she went back, and when can you start? And I started. And it was an office open plan. But fortunately, somewhat, they couldn't find a desk for me where everybody was working. So they put me in a little corner where it was shielded. But I slept most of the time, honestly. And my boss came 3 times, found me passed out completely by my laptop.
They're not saying, hey, this one,
and the first time she came, she's like, Dineo, you cannot sleep on the job.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm sorry, okay, it won't happen. Then she comes back. At that time, because she used to be a smoker, I'm like, let's go for a smoke break. And that's listen here, and very firmly and strongly, and I don't know where I got that from. I mean, this was a new job, and I had a month to prove myself. And I said to her, I told you I'm Nyatwasa, right? I don't sleep. I sleep at 1, I'm up at 2:30. And when I'm up, I can't go back to sleep. And I work the whole day, so limited sleep, so I will pass out. And actually what's happening right now is that I am talking to my ancestors, communicating, connecting, so I can give you what you want, because you've been struggling. So they'll show me things, and they'll tell me things, and I will deliver. Don't bother me, and I'll give you a deadline. I mean, I'll give you your target, and if I don't get to it, you don't pay me. Deal?
Yes.
It's like,
Got it.
okay, but it still makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, well, you have to deal with it, because you don't want to disturb my conversation with my ancestors. And you know, whether we can say like, no, Dineo, you're pulling a stunt or whatever, but the conviction and the courage I had to stand up for myself in a new place of employment, in advertising, Nochal, it's very competitive, you know. But I did, and guess what? 3 weeks before my month deadline, I said, here, delivered. And it was one of the best years for us in the project. They've never had what I brought on the table, and I went on to work for them for 3 years post that, because that's how brilliant it was. But I used to pass out in meetings with client, and my boss would protect me. She'd be like, don't worry, talking to the ancestors, but we'll get the work done.
Yes.
You know.
I mean, but it's one thing for the bosses to understand the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Did you have to find yourself explaining yourself, standing up for yourself, snark remarks?
Yeah, somewhat. I guess I went to Petro 2010. We all had a euphoria of Africa. So when I showed up, it was still in the midst of, wow, all this is African. I mean, I used to ask people, I just recently did a Xhosa process.
Okay.
So part of my lineage is Xhosa, but it was in 2010.
Okay.
And then it's Xhosa just recently. So when I used to wear things, even I used to dress like this in corporate, of course, with formal shoes, because I didn't just want to rock up with layers and layers of clothes and things that didn't, for me, feel comfortable. But people were curious, like, wow, your beads kind of match the outfit.
Yes.
Where can I get them? And the judgments would be mostly, honestly, from people whom you would expect that they understand. Because they will look at you funny, mofagi pandla. You know? But whereas other people I never, honestly, from my own experience, I never experienced discrimination from white people when I did this. It was more curiosity.
That is so hectic.
Even if there was a biasness, I made it my responsibility to address it, and that it should never happen again, and rather you ask me like this. But amongst black people, there was a lot. And people would also start to feel uncomfortable somewhat, because then it was hard in my new job to start to make friends, because they're like, Asazi, you know? And I find it 2021, because that was 2010, 2021 to date, because I train other initiates who work in corporate, it's a living nightmare.
Sure.
It's a living, people lose their jobs, they get fired. We've had battles with big corporations really fighting for the rights of Africans in Africa to be accommodated about who they are. So people have lost their jobs because one of the sleeping problem, and that somewhat you change, because there's another lady who used to wear suits all the time, and they're like, no, you've changed.
Sure.
And now you've got beads, and you know, it's closer to intense galoko. I never used to look like this when I did it's good, because then it would, but I wouldn't come, it would be neat and it would be presentable, and it would be neat for them.
Also, what is neat?
I think for me, neatness is, for me, what is neat?
Isn't it?
Yes. And it's a perception, but I also feel like somewhat the perceptions we've also perpetuated as a Bangoma. Because I learned what neat is when I trained. Because my Kobela, I would say, I'm in corporate. So instead, Guti, because you are required to wear your clothes. Because the layers and layers look untidy somewhat. For me, and because maybe I didn't also know how to tie them up except for a do conflict, so they look neat. I wanted something more presentable.
Yes.
And my Kobela, and I said, can I use this material? Because I'm honoring my process, and make formal outfits, like a nice pencil skirt from it, or a nice dress, you know, that I can go to work and wear my formal shoes, and I can still look presentable. And also neat, my Kobela was also very strict. Neat meant cleanliness. Like, because when you are in the yard and you are training and you are always kneeling, because you're always on your knees, of course you're going to gather dirt from the ground. But she would be very clear that you do not go outside this yard looking like that. Because perception is everything. And I think for me, she instilled in me really demystifying the perceptions that existed in our society, because it's easy for us to say you perceive us that way, but how are we showing up as well? So even she would always say, make sure you put a roll on, because when she trained, they were not allowed to put those things on. And she would tell us that, Patla, before you get dressed up, because mpepo is a beautiful smell, but when it stays in the body, then because it stayed, in your clothes, then for some people it becomes an unpleasant aura. It's not like fresh peppers, but when it stayed overnight on your clothes, it's got some kind of, odor. So she would say things, and it wasn't for us to, so that we be accommodated in corporate spaces, because I wasn't the only one that worked, is so that we can show how beautiful this thing is. That's what she conditioned me to say, yeah, give it a beautiful experience, make it look, and she always used to say, we have kosin. So kosin is about opulence.
That is absolutely beautiful, because, when we have a certain perception about a lot of work that goes into ubai sangoma, and there's also, I think we've been raised and groomed, and it's this thing in our minds, even as African people, from a child to an adult, when you hear sangoma, it's that you can already smell impepo, you can already smell something, you can already smell, and being raised under that guise of you have to accept that into yourself if you are going to accept a calling such as that. You have to take that into the workspace and tell them to accept it, and this is who I come as, this is what I am a representative of. And now you're telling me that all of those things don't have to be.
I think for me, we tend to miss the mark, right? Somewhat, because when we become traditionalist, we tend to cast things into stone. That's why I don't even want to be called a traditional healer. Call me a spiritual healer who is trained as a sangoma and other healing modalities. Because for me, spirituality is about the times of the now. And it's to say from the past, what is the essence that can hold us together in moving into the now and moving forward. Because culture is a way of life. And what people don't understand about tradition is that it's the norms and values and belief systems that are supposed to enable the way of life. So when our ancestors trained to become izangoma, they didn't have workspaces that we have right now. That the cultural practices that existed had to be accommodative and speak to that way of life. So Tina now as izangoma, then what is the essence that we can't lose? I can't lose utangenge without wearing my ancestral cloth, because I need to be able to do that. And I've got, Motwasisinda, you've got red ochre on your hair, red clay on. So I have to wrap a duke so that I don't have that thing go everywhere, because my things are also supposed to be sacred. So how do I then make it, uphold the essence of the things I still need to show up as in my process of being an initiate, but still make sure that it does not mean that it takes me out of the now. So, and it's a very challenging one, because then you find healers, we overdo it sometimes in the attempt of modernity. And the assumption is that our culture has never been modern, but we've always evolved. Cultural practices evolve all the time, because we need to evolve and be innovative, otherwise we become extinct. And I feel like certain cultural practices have become irrelevant because we've become stagnant and have become, we've become stagnant and somewhat become demanding because it's my culture, right? It's like we do it, no, I'm gonna be a polygamous man, it's my culture. But do you understand what it
means?
Is? And do you understand why we actually had the act of polygamy? Because it's an act of polygamy. It's not our culture, it's an act. What was the need and necessity? So people need to understand African spirituality before they understand African culture and tradition. Because the minute you understand African spirituality, a lot of things will start to make sense. And there won't be this thing of it's either or. right? Because we live in the either or. It could be an end, as long as the other is not outshining the other. You know, because spirituality is like, I cannot make myself more significant than you. Spirituality is about ubuntu. I am because you are. So spirituality is understanding ukuthi it's a gift to have Gogo Dineo, who is sangoma and a business consultant, because now she has an army of, you know, she's got surveillance in areas and spaces that we can't survey. There's been times when I bep in a meeting like, oh, what are the ancestors saying? Oh, are we good? Are we good to go? Because then I'm seeing and hearing things that are not spoken in the room, but they are there. And I've seen how an incredible job I've done, because I still consult in corporate, independently. So when I'm facilitating, when I'm doing business coaching, and I tell you, the first thing I say is, even when they read my bio and stuff, I'm like, okay, but I make it clear that I'm a practicing sangoma. And these are the things that are going to happen by default. Is I'm going to bep, I'm going to yawn randomly, and I might take my heels off in the middle of a facilitation session. But those things, when I've been a sangoma, I've done greater work than before I became a sangoma.
Amen.
Because one, of course, I got healing for myself, so I was more grounded. The peace I was seeking, I found it, meaning I could show up more present. But then I would be there in a room facilitating a conference of 100 or 200 people, right? And and then, I mean, it's, extreme. I can smell terrorists in the room. People are going to disrupt the process. Because I'd be sitting there, and you could see that this one person, they don't mean to cause trouble. Their voices has been shut. Then I'll be like, and the people like, we know them. They're always like this. But these are the people who actually stop processes from happening. A lot of things don't become productive in workspaces because of those minority voices. So if we can say actually the minority voices are a gift, and you make them feel like a gift, but sometimes they don't even become vocal. Something will say to me, look to your left, and what I see is a caucus, because it's 100, 200 people. There's a caucus, I can see their phones, I can see destruction, so I'm alert, I'm aware, I'm conscious. So my level of consciousness and alertness increased because I'm a sangoma.
So when I look at, you know, I've listened to what you've said, and I am two minds about, and not two minds in a negative sense. Spirituality, I understand, is a calling, especially when you accept the calling of Uba Sangoma, or you accept the calling of being a spiritual healer. Some careers we would consider as a calling. Some spaces that people move in as they rise higher and they reach certain places within their careers, it could be perceived as some kind of calling that career is made for you. You're good at what you do.
It's so interesting when because you know, even when we look at the thing between religion and African healing, it's always like African healing is spirituality, and as if the other things are not about spirituality. So my take is that everything is a calling. We go into spaces because we're called. We are here because we are called. Otherwise, we would have not been here. So all of us have a divine purpose to fulfill, whether that space is corporate, whether that space is social, whether that space is government. So we all are here to fulfill some kind of thing. And we all go through some sort of process of initiation, whereas going through a pehlweni and detaching from the world and having to go through a rebirth process. Otherwise, life would be smooth sailing. So we all go through initiation processes throughout our lives to actually get to why we're here, to get to that moment of where it's like, I'm fulfilling my purpose. So everyone is here to fulfill the purpose. And then when it comes then to the calling of ubungoma, because certain purposes get cultivated by interest. But ebungomeni, it's not a cultivation of interest. It's because it is, you were called and chosen to go and be a healer. So you can still be a spiritual healer and not be isangoma. You can be a spiritual healer and be a Reiki master. You can be a spiritual healer and be a crystal healer. You can be a spiritual healer and be a tarot card reader, which is where actually I began, as a tarot card reader and a palm reader. So those things don't necessarily have to be like you are called and chosen. You can have an interest in them. But ebungomen definitely, because isangoma is an intermediary between us who are here and our ancestors. So if you are not called, it means you do not have the network or Wi-Fi connection to access the other world. Right? Whereas for the other, with the other healing modalities, including being ikedla or inyanga, a herbalist, you can learn that. You can learn the medicinal properties of a particular plant or particular medicines and their usages. And you can then go on about it because you could do it. But to be sangoma, that's a different ball game altogether. And not a lot of people, and that's what is also unique to us in Southern Africa, is that those of us who are called the Zangoma are called by our ancestors to take on this. So you would find people who say, no, but choose otherwise, because it seems hard, it seems impossible, right? You can choose otherwise. And I would say, somewhat I've already chosen before I even manifested that this is what I'm going to do. So you wanting to redirect the choices I made before I even manifested as a human being, it's messing up with my own soul agreements here. And you are taking me off par, and that's why people will feel ungrounded, not at peace, you know, unwell, and have what we call calling symptoms or suffering the calling, because you are out of touch with what you said you're going to do. So your ancestors, when they're giving you the gift, is that you said yes to it before. So they're coming to actually support you, because it is a co-created experience. When I did a TED Talk in 2019, is that one thing I have learned as a spiritual healer is that we're not held at hostage by our ancestors. Because the minute we start to take this calling as a burden, because what you actually perceive becomes real, and what you believe becomes your reality as well. The minute we feel like it's them giving us a burden, then it's gonna feel like a burden. But when we like, actually, I sign up for a particular calling, you know, whether I'm gonna go into TV and make a difference, whether I'm gonna go into music and make a difference, when I'm gonna go into medicine and make a difference, but I need this element. I need this for me to get to my calling. My calling is to become an African spiritual teacher. And that, what does that mean? Is to return people to their roots and demystify the myths and the misconceptions around African spiritual healing practices. That's the calling, that is to be a spiritual teacher, basically. And I needed to be a sangoma in order for me to get to the higher calling.
And I mean, in the same TED Talk, you also speak about losing your job.
Oh, so
And
you also watched the TED Talk?
I did watch the TED. So in the same TED Talk, you spoke about how you losing your job allowed you to filter into your calling and to walk into your calling. Now, you walk into your calling, and what do you know now that you didn't know then about how people misconceive taking on a calling as a career? Because I've seen a lot of it being a career. And I think that's the perception when you look at from the outside, and that's why a lot of young people now think they can drop everything.
Yeah, so
they view it as this.
Yeah, it's two-dimensional. The first dimension is when I went into it, part of the hesitation to do my calling full-time, because I work full-time as a sangoma. And that's what I say, even when I'm facilitating a process, because I don't leave Gogo Dineo at the door and just come as Dineo. I bring all of me along. So even when I speak of my credentials in the field of my, what we would call formal career, sangoma is a credential. Because I went to school to study to become a sangoma.
Yeah.
And I don't exclude that as my bio thing. It's actually the first thing you read when you read my bio. So when I was told, Guti, leave working for someone and work for us and honor us, I was conflicted, because I was like, yo, how am I going to pay the bills? Because we have been conditioned that this is less valuable than any other offering. Because for me, everything is an offering, and there has to be a value exchange. You know, so if somebody, like I've got people who've stayed with me for 2.5 years, invested in understanding African healing practices, then they leave, and you say no, because it's a calling. This is a calling. It's unlike going to do marketing. For me to come see you, I'll pay $50. That's it's a short exchange. And it's when you make it about the money and the money alone, then it's a problem. But I don't think, and I think that somewhat we can benefit from turning the spiritual callings into careers, because we can start to take it seriously. I'm very serious about my work. You know, I was actually speaking to a producer. I've never missed an interview. I started doing media work in 2014 with Power FM. I have never missed one, except when my son had an incident and I had to rush him into hospital. But I don't, because I take this work very seriously. And I wasn't getting paid for the media work,
Yeah.
but that's how I valued that much. And when I value it, then when people are seeking the services one-on-one, because over the years I've built a speciality. So when I heal, I teach. And as I teach, I empower for you to go on your own without my presence. So when you go see sangoma, you don't go consult sangoma every 2 weeks and every 3 days. And a sangoma says, this is the value exchange, because I am going to be unpacking a history of your life, describing family pathologies and diseases that existed that are getting in the way as blockages to you manifesting what you are seeking for yourself. And then at the same time, I'm also offering some psychotherapy, because here you are getting a life shock about what my mother was supposed to be, or this is happening, but then we don't want to put value onto it. How then are we expecting our work to compete globally? How are we going to really then have value in the global market? Because we do understand that if we look at what is currently happening, I mean, coronavirus-wise, what the UN is asking, the World Health Organization about the inclusion of indigenous healing practices, because they recognizes that those systems existed, and those systems were health systems that really helped the communities that relied on them function. So we did not understand medicine when science or Western science came. There were systems, but because of colonization, we've eradicated those systems. And Corona says, we are nemva. Kaloku siyaquma apha. Yabo? Because now they'll tell you of streaming. Kaloku, go and get vitamin C, D from the sun, because we worked the land and we were out in the sun. So for me, it's somewhat, it would be important, because we can also take ourselves seriously in the services that we offer. We can offer better services. When people come, we don't scare you. We treat you with dignity. We give you better customer service. We make it feel more comfortable. We help you enroll, because we've got early conditions and belief systems about what ubungoma is. So you come to me and I was like, would we like tea, cappuccino? Wouldn't you feel like, oh wow, this is a good service.
This is a service.
Right? And then you come in and say, hi, we've got a file, we're gonna open a file for you. And that's how I work. So we're gonna open a file for you, and we explain why we're opening a file, because should you need to come back after the consultation, we can pull out a file and look at what it was, what was the diagnosis, what was the
last
treatment
time,
plan. And we even explain to you that your treatment expires in 3 months. Should you fail to come back, you'll need to reconsult. What a service.
Sure.
Right? And then we say, okay, you have to come because it's in-house, because you are learning how ukupahla. You're learning certain basics that you did not have, because that's why you came to Isangom. You're learning those things, but you don't have to bother about, what's the measurement? What am I doing? Oh my God, am I switching on the pepper first or the candle first? You get a service. So if we can start to look at it that way, then can we say we actually, our things sometimes don't work because we're not putting value into them. It's not that they don't work, it's that we are not willing to invest in them.
Sure.
Feels like I should be hired as a marketing manager for Ubungoma traders.
That is, but that is absolutely true. I mean, there's also, and you mentioned it at the beginning as well, in the fact that a lot of people, a lot of workers within the spiritual world, and like abantu that are initiated in Ubungoma, they don't put that value in respecting their craft. Like you know what the boundary is to what you do. Not gonna go around it goes to back exactly that. It's when we apply the value to it, and the spiritual workers apply the value to the work, we meet each other there.
Yeah, and it's like, again, like I said, it's a co-create. I mean, my Uber driver was ecstatic. I was like, oh, it's you. My God. He even asked me, what time have you done? Because I can really pick you up. I'm like, actually, I work in Cosmo, I live in Midrand, so it's not gonna work, you know? And before that, I left my practice with somebody who said they dreamt about me and I have to initiate them. And I've got very strict enrollment processes, because that's how much I value the work that I'm called to do. I'm not just gonna be excited by numbers, you know? I don't wanna get excited by numbers. Quality is very important to me versus quantity. And like I said, I take what I do as service, because when my ancestors said to me, and to somebody, if your ancestors are okay getting 50 rands donations, and it's okay, because spirituality is complex. I cannot want to say to you how I do things should be how you do it. Because yours might still want to keep basics, but mine might want basics and. So when they said to us, leave corporate and do our work, it meant that they meant I needed to be invested like how I was in corporate. And to be invested in it requires resource input. I always say to people, when you come, people don't think of resources. So when I say Iza and you're going to Palaza, meaning to patch, you're going to Futa, meaning to Kuma, it means that there are input costs, right? There's my electricity, there's my water, there's the cleaning services because we have to wash the blankets. But we don't think that way.
Don't.
Because, and when we do, we become grumpy as healers. And that's why we'll go having pamphlets about everything I can
Either
do.
than-
I will enlarge your penis, I'll make you win the lottery, you'll
Other than what you exactly need.
right? No, but other than understanding your essential service, I understand what my mastery is as a healer.
Yeah.
Because I am not out to get the numbers to make up for the loss. Because that's the other thing. We want to make up, and when you come, I'm from a busy 9 to 5. I need to sit and do mbeni. You know, our work is so hard because it is emotionally, psychologically, and physically intense, even spiritually. Because when you come into my ndumba, I don't ask you what's wrong with you. I tell you what's wrong with you. I'm not like a doctor to say, what have you been experiencing? If ubetwa intloko, that headache would pound until I'm done with you.
Yeah.
If you've got a severe back, there's some people, there was a lady I consulted, luckily it was an international consultation, so it was a Zoom. You know, I was literally lying flat because I was lethargic. I could have cancelled the consultation if I didn't know better, because all of a sudden I was overwhelmed with lethargia. So do you understand the intensity of what it takes on my physical body to always be consulting and consulting and consulting? But we don't consider those things because our conditioning in society as Africans is never to value anything that comes from our own people. It's not only ebungemeni. That's one of the things and the narratives we need to change as Africans, to say it is time. If I'm willing to pay a medium, a psychic 1,500 rand, why am I complaining when it's Gogo Dineo?
Does it not go back to, you know, I read a piece last year during Fees Must Fall, Black Lives Matter movement, when it was peaking during lockdown, in that whiteness is built off of, and how white people built their nations and built the Western nations was through taking and looting off of what blackness is.
Yeah.
So it was taking blackness, putting it into white spaces to turn the land, to work the land, to earn money off of it, and then the surplus was to be preserved by them. So when we understand that, we understand what we need to take back. We understand the need to bring it back to how do we take what we're able to do, work our own land and retain our own surplus. And when we think about things that way, we're able to put value on spiritual work that is our own.
Do you know how much Mpepo costs at a herbal or your crystal shops? It's about 90 bucks. It's a stick of Mpepo. They also have iziwasho manje, those mineral salts we use. Now, you know,
It's there.
yeah, right? But go to Faraday Multi-Market, and we would then complain about, but it's not hygienic, whatever. But how do you expect it if you go to a herbalist? This is a person who woke up in the morning to deliver fresh herbs at the market, and you want to negotiate for a discount. No, but I'm buying 5, so what are you going to give it to me for? But when you go to a mainstream retailer or pharmaceutical company, you take the price as is. You don't, you even trust because it is known. So it's those paradigm shifts that needs to happen. So there's a lot of decolonization that needs to happen, especially amongst us as Africans, because I find that sometimes I need to explain, and I'm not in the business of explaining myself. I'm not in a business of why I charge what I charge. I say there's many of us, you make your choice. I know what I do, and I know the value I bring into the work, and I know that what I do does work, right? And meaning that it does work, but it doesn't mean it's for everyone, because that's the complexity of spirituality. Because I can do X, and when I have to come to you, it's not working. And that's why I say to people, let's not be taken by popularism. Don't be excited that Gogo X and X works with who and is associated with who, and therefore, you know, because people will come to me because of the people I'm associated with. Like, oh my God, like some people I don't even know. They're like, oh, we heard you did this for this. I'm like, thank you for the credit, but half of those people I don't know. And yes, there's people I know, and yes, I've done work, but understand that yes, it's good by recommendation, But things in the ancestral world works differently.
Yeah.
Are you willing to put in the work? Because that's the mistake people make. They come to us thinking we carry a magic wand.
Yes.
Right? It's like, I'm going to weave your problems away. I will fix your marriage. I'll bring your lost lover back. I'll make sure you get that promotion yesterday, you get the Ferrari, and you get, that's activation. And that's where we get into what we call the dark side of the practice. Because, I mean, it's acceleration. Because to activate, it's organic growth. It's like, we're going to plant the seeds together. And I'm asking you, a patient, to also water it, right? And at 2 p.m., please prune the weeds, but you don't want to do the work. You just want me as the healer to be the one putting all the work. If you don't follow the instructions, similar when you go to a doctor, take your antibiotics after meals, right? Complete the course in 7 days consecutively. You don't do that, the infection doesn't go away. But you will never hear us saying the doctor is incompetent. But should it be me? I would be labeled incompetent. I will be called all sorts of names. Yeah, she doesn't have this, she's not even gifted, just because of one error. And I try in my work to also educate. So, because my work is to heal, but it's to also, like you said, facilitate of change, help people see things from a different perspective. So even in my small room, when I'm sitting with someone, today I was facilitating a family consultation, and issues of who was bewitching, who happened. And I said, how did you come to the conclusion that your sister's bewitching you?
Hey.
And it's like, because of this and this and this. I'm like, okay. And then we had, and that's an opportunity to really say, when we're going through problems, it's not always somebody else doing it to us. Sometimes we go through our own challenges because life is challenging and life is going to be hard. Same as me as Gogo Dineo. Sometimes I also have to ask for the things. I also have to ask for the holiday that I would like to go to.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that I can make magic for myself. And that's the expectation sometimes when people come and say, if it's this much, are you going to guarantee me, Guti, it's going to be like this? You can go for an op, you're 60,000. But they'll tell you there's no chances are, that's why you signed that very long contract with small written letters.
Anything can happen there.
There, right? They won't say, we paid 100,000.
It depends on how your body reacts and what happened, but anything can happen there.
You can go do that op, but you might not get the yummy mommy body back. Because your body might react differently. But when it's us, it's a lot. And I like I said, I don't think it comes from Ebungo Menik. But you could see how the colonial constructs have infiltrated black businesses to a point where it becomes shocking to people when we say we want to formalize our institution of practice. We want to do those things. We want to make sure that we are able to be, we need to be able to compete with the global market. Otherwise, this Bungoma right now is, we know everybody is like, wow, Bungoma, African spirituality, everybody's having conversations about it. But what's the long-term impact? Because that's where we should be focusing on.
So how has the practice and your perspective of Ubungoma changed and shifted your perspective of how you view things being done within corporate spaces and within the work world? Because you still consult, right? How has it shifted your mindset of how things are done in those spaces?
I think for me, what has become much more aware is that corporate space is very colonial and it's very white supremacist and also very patriarchal. So it's whereas before I wasn't understanding it. So when I stepped out of it and going back into it, I'll make an example. We're going to do some webinars. And when we're doing webinars, and this white woman I'm doing work with, I was wearing almost a similar dress like this. So the white colleague compliments me like, wow, that's a beautiful dress. It's an African piece dress. And she was like, can I just ask something? I don't mean to be disrespectful. That's what she did. So in corporate space, for example, you cannot show your cleavage, and you cannot do this. How do I bring it up? Because this was work we're doing with varsity students. And I said to her, you need to understand what corporate and which eyes you're looking into corporate. Because in my culture, dressing up like this is not disrespectful because we don't sexualize women's bodies. We've learned to sexualize them over time because we understood that it was a temple and a sacred thing, and we don't tamper with it because we're tampering with God's artwork. So when you tend to sexualize it, because for whom are we covering up for? And it's not about, of course, I mean, but it's covered up. And because we naturally,
we sexualize even the arms.
yeah,
I mean,
no, but in our anatomy as black women, we are big boned, not fat, big boned, right? Most of us would have.
Yes.
So it's in our anatomy.
Yes.
And just because their anatomy is something else, they would, you know, and that's when I realized, I'm like, no, man, these corporate laws, some of them are not really meant for us. Like I've had people whom had to, you know, because they would complain about the beads. And would complain about his pandla. And I used to have that even before I became a sangoma. When I became woke or entered into African spirituality, where my brother was asked to cut his pandla sack because was going to Ilentuzan. And I said to the teacher, as long as you're willing to buy the gold and cover for the ceremony that did this, you know, because I said, how come Hindus can put their red strings around? Yes, you know, like other people can do stuff. And it's okay. I wrote a small article on my Insta to say it's such an irony that when we slaughter, it's called cruelty,
animal
right?
cruelty.
Animal cruelty, and or if it's not animal cruelty, it's witchcraft to the religious people. We're performing, you know, witchcraft act, but you know, the Muslims do it. They call it halal because they have to. It's a sacred act. You don't kill the animal. There's a prayer. That's what we do. You know, in Jewish culture, it's called kosher. But when we do it, it's something else. And that's the same thing, even how we show up. When we show up a certain way, it's the thing of like, no, it's inappropriate. And you did ask a question earlier on about what's really, you know, neat and what's that. Because according to corporate culture, some things, your hairstyle may look inappropriate.
Yes.
You know, like, no, but you need to comb it. But it's not my DNA to have straight hair. So you wanting appropriateness or neatness based on whose standards. And I think that's what I found. And it's something that I have, because I train people, I mean, we write letters to corporate spaces. Some, fortunately, we do get meetings with them because they're curious, you know, but some are not willing. They're totally not willing. They'll say this is company policy. And I'm like, but policies have to change. If they don't meet the needs of the majority of the staff members that they're working for, because it's not only about ubungoma, it's also about people who want to practice and embrace their, you know, traditional practices. I come back and bateka yangzile. So I have to come and change my attire because I need to be in my morning wear. I need to come, and corporate culture might be like, no, this is inappropriate.
This is inappropriate.
But then we have people taking sabbaticals, and that's fine, but we can't have sabbaticals for people going for initiation processes. So you see, it's still, for me, it's a bit of a double standard because they have terms and things that they call within the corporate space that accommodates other races, but not ours.
Still very Western way of looking at things. What would you say to someone that is stepping into their calling but fearful of losing their job, their financial security?
I think one thing is that fear is real, so you gotta acknowledge it because sometimes we wanna create euphorias and expectations. I think one of the things that I learned is that, and I said that in my TED Talk, just taking your calling doesn't mean everything will fall into place. Things can fall apart before they fall into place. So acknowledge that fear is real. You might lose your job because we currently do not live in a corporate culture that is very much acceptive and receptive, not even understanding or empathetic to us, you know, and what we do. So acknowledge that fear is real. The other thing I'll tell you is that truly when you are called, Lozi always makes a way.
Amen.
And I've seen it for myself. Because sometimes, you know, the job loss is the dying of the old because it carries an old you. Your old identity is so invested in your job. When I lost my job, that's when I was like, oh, I don't have a job because I felt like I was going in my career. You know, I felt like, okay, I can actually move from this consultant, you know, when you move from senior consultant to partner.
Yes.
Because one day I imagined myself as a partner in the business. Then I was like, ooh, and everybody looked up to me in the family about, wow, so, you know, understand that when certain things, when the old has to die, when the leaves have served their season, we gotta let go. Because fighting it is going to fight the process that might be gifting you even stronger, brighter leaves, actually new roots, because roots they are forever lasting. Leaves change every season. So it's very important for people to know that. As I say, let go and let close. Because remember, when you are called, you are dealing with entities that are not tangible. We see them in our dreams, in our visions, but we don't see it and feel and touch things as we would other things.
Yeah.
So what you might be experiencing is to actually a test of faith. Because it's to, when you let go and let close, is to say, I let go and trust in you, that things will be taken care of. And what it built for me is humility and humbleness. So whomever I can become or have become, and no matter how many legacies I can create, that's not going to take away the essence of who I am, because Petro shredded off all the false identities, all these things of like, if I make it in corporate, then I will be like this. Because Petro, it is about shredding off your ego, your false sense of self, so that that which God has made you to become, is become, you know, you step into your power, but not to overpower, but to empower other people.
Amen.
So for me, it's that is very important. And to also trust in Jos Taimi, because sometimes we do things because now everybody's doing them.
Yeah.
But is that what your people are asking you to do? I always say to people, I don't encourage them to leave their corporate jobs. I say to them, pull through. I understand it's difficult. We know we can make measures. I can make measures, but there's certain things I can't do because then it violates the code of TRASA. But I can say to you, leave early, get to the parking lot, sleep for an hour, right? Use your lunch, and you can eat in 15 minutes because anyway you're trained to eat faster, and then take 45 minutes nap. When you leave work, don't come straight home, sleep, you know? Okay, park your car, take public transport. So we can be innovative, right, around those things of how we can. And when we can, I would say, okay, we take a break this week from waking up at 2:30 in the morning. Let's do 6, so that our bodies can rejuvenate,
again.
you know. So it's those things. It tests a lot, but it gives a lot as well. I would not, if I would to do this again, I would definitely do it, because I've done 3 initiation processes post my initial process. Because when I came out of my first process, I was like, wow, where have you been, Petra? I'm like, this is
Who this? Look at this brand new me, who this?
Right? And one of the most incredible brand new me is that I loved myself extra. I could wear short sleeve things, whereas I couldn't because I had body image issues. But I could love myself without having to go get the material things. Like, I was no longer worried about, my kids went back to township schools. We ate mantuana, you know, and chicken feet. But there was so much peace. I was like, I'm whole, you know. And I was like, I didn't understand why people were demonizing it. But Josie showed me miracles, because people showed up when I needed them the most, not when I wanted them. Right? And it's like everything just happened. Only when I let go, when I stopped being in my head and I went inside. And I could, and I could get, and not everything was material. Right? I would meet somebody and be like, oh, you look skinny, because I lost a lot of weight. It's like, yeah, I'm tossering. And they're like, oh, what can we do for you? And I'm like, actually, it also helped me swallow my pride and be okay to ask for help, because we're not okay to ask for help.
The pride.
Yeah, right? Because it's like, what happened to the corporate girl who was about to buy the new whatever? Now you say you don't have 2,000 for your coat? Because I was honest. It taught me honesty and openness. There's so much. I mean, this will be like 5
We could
TED
go
talks
on and on and
5
on
shows.
and on, and we could go on. You know,
I think the last thing that I would also say is that be honest with your employer. From the word go. You don't wake up having the calling. I feel like sometimes when we can become honest with our employers, they can show a little bit of empathy, not always. And also be honest with your Joses, because they lived, they had a body to say, hi, man, I love my job. I wouldn't really want to lose it just for the sake of you or the feelings that I'm dishonoring the other. I would love to, you know, can we find a dance between these two worlds? Can we find this and this way? And I always say, when you love what you've been called to do, it will love you back. And sometimes it doesn't love us back because it needs to teach us to love it first before we want the rewards from it.
Amen.
Hey, I think bavumile.
Bavumile. And how do we get hold of you? Because we can talk on and on and on and on. But how do we get hold of you for anyone out there?
The same way you got hold of me, watch me on on YouTube.
YouTube,
because
Instagram.
that's resource. That's a
yes.
resource, and there's a lot of things, even for people who are trying to get into African spirituality and understand it, who feel conflicted against their religion, people who don't know if they have a calling or it's not a calling, it's a midlife crisis. Because sometimes we tend to think the calling will solve everything. There's a lot of content there on my YouTube channel. And there's a lot of my old podcasts from the radio shows I used to do, you know, from Power to Metro, even on SoundCloud, there's a lot there. And on Instagram, I do streams at least 3 times a week, live streams, and this is where you can engage. But when you need my services, so don't DM me to ask me about a headache you have. Watch a YouTube video and see if there's no a DUI, do it yourself, cure headache. When you need my services, I've got a website, Gogo Dineo Ndlanzi. .com, and there's our WhatsApp line there, 074-210-2089, 074-210-2089. That it gets faster sometimes than email because it's a so we're not always on other bigger devices, but on the phone we can easily do that. And then you can book for a consultation. And it's not only me. I work with my husband, Mkhulu Mkashwa. So he's one of the consultants. I trained to be a sangoma. Yeah, that's a story for another time, because we took a 3-year break from our marriage. We had to separate. That's how intense it became. And we're trying to rebuild again. So it's for the first time actually I'm saying my husband in 3 years. And he's one of the senior consultants, because we run the institute together. And there's the Gogos that I'm training. So they're being observed by me. Then there's mine. And mine is that there's about a 2 months waiting period. So I always say to people, if it's an emergency, there are other healers who can attend to it. And if I'm needed, because I'm always available, when there's a serious emergency, I'll be called and I'll come to the practice. Because you know how sometimes people are like, I'm dying. I'm dying. I gotta see you now.
Because I'm going through the most.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like I can't do things, because my passion is to do these shows, is to really teach.
And this is God aligning you again in that marketing space. He's bringing you back. And just for the international audience, the number again with a +27?
Yeah, it's a +27. And yeah, man, I should have listened to closely, because I had when I was listening to it, they said do it with the +27. It's +27 74-210-2089. But this is what I can also say. There's a lot of Facebook fake accounts.
Yes.
I'm mostly active on Instagram, because for me it gives me a peace of mind. So if you DM me on Instagram, you'll find Gogo Dineo. And I've been in the game for some time, so you'll see, okay, there's Gogo, and it looks like Gogo's page. DM me, I will give you the number. Or when you go on the gogodineo.com website, you will find the WhatsApp number, and it's with the international code as well.
Awesome. I think globally we need healing. Black people need healing, and we need to remove our minds from this preconceived idea of what spiritual healing is in the Black context. And this is the first place you stop at. Thank you so much, Gogo Dineo. We truly appreciate you. Thank you. I know, Guta, you don't say thank you.
No, I don't believe in that. I don't understand it. I mean, I don't even believe why women come with
There's not enough gratitude that we can give.
Yes, we can't just say we don't. Why? Because angisho singabantu abanobubele, nobuntu. So if we are people like that, then when somebody has gifted a gift of their time or anything else, it is also good to gift back gratitude. And the more we are grateful, the more we can attract the things to be grateful for.
The more we are grateful, the more we can attract things to be grateful for. So Ivala Apo, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Sit Down Careers. Until next time.